against President Trump as early as Monday. With only a week and a half left in his term, it seems as if this is a fool's errand. Plus, Twitter kicking President Trump off the platform, and other social media giants have done the same. Want to bring in the legal scholar himself, Alan Dershowitz, to discuss all of this. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you got double duty today, but want to get to the heart of this matter. What does this even mean right now to try to have an impeachment process? We know impeachment will be dead on arrival in the Senate for the trial. The trial would likely not even occur because there's only 11 days left in this term. What is this even about? Is this really just political theater from people preaching peace while they pour gasoline on the fire and fan the flames of division?
Well, it's worse than a fool's errand. It would establish a terrible precedent that you could impeach a president for making a constitutionally protected speech. No one I know would seriously doubt that what President Trump said, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, and I disagree with much of what he said, is constitutionally protected. He didn't incite violence. Incitement has a very technical meaning under the constitutional jurisprudence of the First Amendment. What he did is he advocated. He was leading a demonstration, and constitutionally and legally, he's not responsible for what ensued. People are entitled to make their own moral judgments, but there's no basis for impeaching him under any circumstances, nor is there a basis for impeaching him for his conversation with the Secretary of State of Georgia, where he said, find ballots. What he meant in context, obviously, and he said it, was find me lawful ballots that were not counted. If they were for me and they were not counted, I want you to find them. Perfectly appropriate to do that. So it would establish a terrible, terrible precedent if a president could be impeached for completely lawful, constitutionally protected conduct.
Right. Now, switching gears a little bit, this is all brought about by the fact that it seems Vice President Pence refusing to go along with Nancey Pelosi as it pertains to the 25th Amendment. There have been those who have suggested that we should actually use that. But from my understanding, it seems as if the 25th Amendment in and of itself would be an extended process that would probably take in excess of 3 weeks because President Trump is not going to lie down on the railroad tracks and get run over. And even so, there's still the issue of whether the 25th Amendment is intended for that purpose. Talk to us a little bit about that.
It's clearly not. Look, framers of the 25th Amendment all discussed incapacitation. They discussed a president like Wilson who had a stroke, or a president who might have Alzheimer's, or a president like Reagan who was shot, or a president like Bush who had to have a colonoscopy. Those are the circumstances under which the 25th Amendment operates. It says unable to discharge powers. It's not about a president who made a controversial speech or a controversial phone call. It's not an amendment that allows circumvention of the criteria for impeachment. It would be completely unconstitutional and completely outside the rule of law for Nancey Pelosi or anybody else to urge invocation of the 25th Amendment. Remember, Congress is not above the law. They are bound by the Constitution, and the Constitution would not permit the invocation of the 25th Amendment or the impeachment clause for the circumstances under consideration here.
Now, switching gears a little bit, you have big tech basically waging war on the conservative movement as a whole, not just President Trump, but other kind of larger figures in the conservative movement and larger groups. What is at issue here? Because I think it's less about is it legal for them to keep people off the platform, but what is the precedent? And also, what is our recourse moving forward when you have companies that are basically monopolies, Apple and Google, who monopolize the mobile marketplace, basically being able to dictate what companies have access to the marketplace based solely on their political leanings?
No, that's completely right. These are very hard issues under the First Amendment. The easy issue is Section 230, which gives these platforms the immunity that none of us has. If we defame somebody, we can be sued. But if they allow defamation on their platform, they can't be sued. But if they're picking and choosing what to put on the platform, then they're certifying that certain items are probably true or legitimate. So they lose their exemption under Section 230 if they start censoring people. Also, I think if you start saying, unless you do this, we'll take you off our platform, it really raises questions about monopolistic practices. And there are lawsuits now pending, both in the federal courts and in the state courts, against some of these platforms. So we're going to see in the next 5 years or so new congressional legislation, new judicial decisions, and new jurisprudence concerning the rights and powers of these mega giant platforms.
I got about 30 seconds here before we lose you. But when we start talking about what are the options here, you've got about, I don't know how to really to phrase it, but most of these tech giants right now, they've benefited, to your point, from these Section 230 protections. What is the remedy right now to try to fight this back? Every person that tries to sue big tech fails because of these 230 protections.
YouTube, I have a show on YouTube called The Dershowitz, and I challenged them to take it down because I put Joel Pollak on, who deliberately violated their standards. And if they had taken down The Dershowitz, I would have sued them under Section 230. They haven't done that. They pick and choose who they take down. Again, I challenge them to take me down, see it in court.
All right, Alan Dershowitz, have to leave it there. Thanks so much for your time. Coming up, we'll take on the pulse of the nation with our radio hosts from around the country when we get back. And welcome back. Well, each week we take the pulse of the nation. That's when we check in with radio hosts from around the country to find out what listeners all across this great nation are thinking. This week we've got Dan O'Donnell, the Milwaukee talk show host, and also Mark Davis, a host with the Salem Media Group. Good afternoon to you both. Dan, I want to start with you. What are your listeners telling you? Because this has been a wild week, to say the least.
I mean, my goodness, from Georgia to what happened on Wednesday to big tech censorship, they've been telling me that, quite frankly, they're outraged. They're outraged that Republicans lost the Senate in Georgia. They're outraged at the way that a fiery but mostly peaceful protest, is that what these things are called when they spiral out of control on the left, is being covered the way it is and being used as a pretext to throw President Trump off of Twitter. And big tech is basically conspiring to try to get anyone who doesn't support the leftist narrative thrown off of the internet. I mean, this has been one of the more consequential weeks, I dare say, in the last 10 years.
Now, Mark, I'll come to you because it does feel as if, obviously what happened at the Capitol was unacceptable. But to Dan's point, it does appear now it is being used as pretext to have a full-out assault on all things conservative. What say you, and what are your listeners telling you?
Exactly right. The listeners perceive, and get ready for this to play out some more in this coming week, that everything Dan said is correct. The attack on the Capitol was